So the Caesar Grail front should either be out right now or it should be coming out tonight, depending on when this video actually goes live on my channel. But this is going to be a big deal for a lot of people because this event brings back Romulus, a servant that a lot of people were really hyped for from Lost Belt 5.2. And for good reason. Not only is the guy pretty cool, pretty chatty in the story chapter, I would say, but he's also very solid as well. Definitely one of the more quirky servants, like, not to say that he's bad or anything, but he definitely takes a little bit of kind of getting used to with his niche, but once you get it down, he's really, really fun to use. And you can, of course, I mention this all the time, you can do so many fun things, just like mixing damage mods around, bringing people like Boudica into a little bit of relevance, technically, because of how he works with like giving people the Roman trait. It's just a really fun servant to use, right? Even if you don't think he's like the best servant ever, anything insane like that, he's still really fun. So we're going to talk about him in today's video. If you guys have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for daily FGO content. Also, make sure you check out my Twitch, which is linked down in the description down below. I stream every weekday starting at about 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Doing a little bit of diverging there over on the Twitch, by the way. Not only do we play FGO, but I am trying out Arknights, and it definitely hurts my head a little bit. Other Arknight players can definitely maybe relate to kind of that feeling. So yeah, if you want to see me try out other things, I am trying those out over there as well. Just branching out, kind of broadening the horizons on some of the mobile games, but yeah, if that interests you, check that out in the description down below. But let's go ahead and start talking about Romulus, starting off with his hits. And Romulus is built in the way that I absolutely love my Buster servants to be built. Double Buster card, double Arts card. You know, I absolutely love that because the double Buster card allows him to do a Buster Brave Chain with his own NP, and the double Arts card helps him out when it comes to regaining his own NP. Although, unless you're really doing crits on those Arts cards, I've found that you're not really getting a whole lot of NP gain back because his NP gain is at 0.59%, which isn't bad, but it's not necessarily good. And 3 hits on the Arts card with that isn't, again, bad, but unless you're critting, you're not really going to be feeling like you're getting a whole lot of NP back. But again, with Buster Servants, you should know that the name of the game is doing crits all over the place. So if you're pairing it with people like, say, Merlin with like 2030s, or you have Koyenskaya in the future, you should be fine. Because, you know, Koyenskaya bombs some stars on the field to play around with. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal because that's kind of what Buster Servants like to do in general. His quick card's also like decent, 4 hits on it with 12.2% star gen. If it's in a Brave Chain, you'll get a couple of stars, but I wouldn't really rely on it for just like hard carrying all of your star gen and everything. But overall, the guy's got some very solid hits. I like the way he's built. Not as much of a fan as like the old Lancer design, where old Lancers always just had like double Buster, double Quick. Didn't really like that too much because it hurts some of them when it comes to their NP gain. But yeah, I think he is absolutely fine. Built pretty solidly, if maybe just a little too safe when it came to the hits, but I think they definitely made up for all of that when it came to all of his skills, because his skills are just chocked full of a bunch of really good effects. So starting off with his first skill, this is basically Romulus's Charisma. So we actually just talked about Kukulkan, and he's got kind of a similar thing going with this first skill, where you have the base effects of the skill, but if you meet a prerequisite, you're actually able to get bonus effects from this Charisma. So at baseline level, he's going to give everybody in the party a 20% attack buff and a 20% crit damage buff, both for 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. That in and of itself is already really solid. I always talk about how I like my art servants to give, you know, the party like NP gain or arts buffs because that helps out their supports more. Thankfully, Buster supports in Koyenskaya and Oberon like to do a lot of damage with their own NPs, and so giving them offensive buffs is like one of the few team comps what actually benefits them. So I do like it for that. But if you can actually pull off his NP before you fire this skill, because spoiler alert, his NP turns everybody Roman, all enemies and all allies. If you could pull that off, he actually will give them an additional 30% crit damage for 3 turns, making him a very strong offensive support for not only himself, but for everybody else that's around him as well, because 20% attack plus a 50% crit damage buff, the same buff that, you know, Waver is going to be giving to people with his crit damage buff, but for the entire party, is very, very nice. Again, considering that someone like Koyenskaya and Oberon can also be kind of used as pseudo support slash DPSs, right? They can kind of fill both roles, so it's really strong in those setups, and so it just lends to him having a pretty strong charisma, and that's just the first skill. Moving into his second skill, I like to kind of consider this his little utility box skill because it's going to be giving him 2 hits of invincibility for 3 turns, a 30% battery, and 10 crit stars. Just a little bit of good stuff sprinkled all around, and it synergizes pretty well with each other because maybe you just want the immediate battery. You need that 30% to fire your NP. Maybe it synergizes with a starting charge that either you have. Well, don't worry, you're not going to waste your survivability buff because it's hit based and it lasts a couple of turns. So I like the synergy there that they're kind of tying those effects together, but you're not going to waste the invincibility because they at least last for a couple of turns. And then the 10 stars, while not a whole lot, is kind of nice, again, if you're using him with someone like, say, Merlin, who can passively generate stars with his own NP, and especially if you've got stuff like 2030 going along, that 10 stars might be the little bit of extra stars that you need to kind of top off your party to make sure that everybody's doing crits for that turn. It's just a really nice balanced skill that just gives him a lot of just goody stuff that he might want, you know, some really good survivability, easier access to his NP, what I was kind of talking about earlier. We're talking about his 2 arts cards, how they're decent but not super OP. This kind of helps alleviate that issue. And then 10 stars to kind of provide him a couple of stars in case he needs to do a few crits. So just an overall really solid skill. Like, again, I do call it like his toolbox skill because it's giving him a lot of just really generic good stuff that any servant would really want. Then finally we close out with his 3rd skill. This is where things start to get a little bit interesting. So he's giving himself a 30% buster buff for 3 turns. Already that's very strong because that's going to be buffing into his 1st skill. If you don't know, different buff types in FGO are multiplicative, and this is actually why Romulus can do a lot of damage. In fact, he is like the hardest hitting AoE Lancer we have so far. He does be doing a lot of damage, although technically at NP1, I think Karna still out damages him. And other servants can like surpass his special damage mod that we'll kind of talk about it a little bit when we get to his NP. But yeah, the guy does do a lot of damage, hits pretty hard. He gives himself a little bit of star weight for 1 turn. That can be nice if you're like, oh, I noticed I got my like arts card right there. I want to pop this, immediately suck up those stars, do some big crits, crit on the arts card, refund a lot of NP, just stuff like that. But then the last effect here is also really interesting because it gives himself an on-attack buff for 3 turns that gives the person that he attacks the Roman trait debuff for 5 turns. However, he only actually lands this when he does do a critical hit, so it can be a little bit iffy, but it's kind of just another way for Romulus to really stack this Roman trait on people. And you'll notice that he did it on his 1st skill. He has a way to do it on his 3rd skill, like so he can either immediately slap it on there, he could do extra ones if he's critting. And I guess we'll just go to the NP because this is why it's really important, because he has a bonus mod against Roman enemies, right? Depending on how many stacks that he's been able to put on them, depends on how much damage he's going to be able to do to them. And so you really want to start just stacking these counts on people, just really start just overloading them with this Roman buff so you can just do as much damage as possible. But you can even see in like the damage chart that should come up here relatively soon that even with just a couple of stacks, like just like 3 stacks, you know, the one you can get from like the NP, one from doing a crit, and then one that's like guaranteed from the 1st skill, you can already start ramping up his damage a lot. It's just how long can you kind of start smacking people with these debuffs? And keep in mind, they last for a long time. Like the ones in the NP last for 5 turns. Like you definitely do have the opportunity to start smacking the enemy with a lot of these debuffs. And it's kind of why, while I do think you can pull off some farming setups with Romulus, the 30% battery can make it a little bit more difficult, but it makes him a bit better as like a boss killing servant because you start ramping up these Roman traits, you're just going to start obliterating people, right? And it's one of those reasons that I think Romulus will kind of age pretty well as the game goes on, because right now he's kind of just like a solid guy, but once we start getting like longer and longer fights, like you can start really just start hanging out in that fight for a long period of time, you could just start smacking dudes with like infinite Roman debuffs. Even just bring 2 Romuluses, you know, why not? Bring both of them, have them both just start smacking everybody with debuffs. And you can really just start obliterating enemies by just having them both be at like max stacks or something like that. Because then you can just start getting up to some really crazy amount of damage. But is he like a must summon that you have to go for? No, I don't think he's a must summon servant. I think he's really strong and I think he's really fun to use. He's one of those guys that you can just like bring to any stage and just kind of like mess around with and just have a fun time if you don't want to use like the normie like meta strategy, right? Like if you want to do something a little bit different, but I don't think he's necessarily like worth just like going for, especially with the potential idea that Lost Belt 6 might come out a bit early. We still don't know what is going on with that. We won't really know until the end of May, where maybe we get a little bit more details. But again, seeming like they're going to drop Lost Belt 6 early, it's kind of like you probably want to hodl your Saint Quartz a little bit more, especially now that like a lot of these really OP servants are going to be coming seemingly early. Although my only real doubts about Lost Belt 6 coming early is like how it would affect the schedule, because it would really throw things out of whack. So I'm really like saying it's kind of soft confirmed that it's probably going to be coming out early, but I don't know, because the wording for it seems like it's going to come out early, but the way it would like mess with the schedule and everything just doesn't make it seem very likely. So I don't know. We'll see about that. I already did a whole video talking about that if you want to watch that video. But yeah, bottom line, if you really like Romulus, then by all means, you can go ahead and summon for him. If he's like your favorite servant of all time, you thought he was super chatty in 5.2, by all means, go for it. But if you're asking me, like, is it a really good idea to summon for Romulus with the prospect of Lost Belt 6 coming out early? Probably not, dude, because Lost Belt 6 in and of itself brings so many broken servants to the table that you're probably gonna want to get your grubby little mitts on like Morgan or like Melusine or Oberon or somebody, right? So I would tell you to save, but again, not gonna stop anybody from summoning for their favorite servant, because my philosophy with a lot of these mobile games is like you're never gonna have everybody, and it's going to be like a gambling gacha fest for like the however long you play it. Might as well go for your favorite servants in the meantime, right? Like on JP, I summoned for Gilgamesh when he came out for New Year's. Is Gilgamesh the best servant in the game? No. Would I recommend people to summon for Gilgamesh on that banner? Probably not. I'd tell you to save on JP for like the new broken servants, but he's my favorite guy in all of Fate. Like he's my favorite Fate character. Of course, I'm going to try and go and summon for him, you know? Sometimes you just got to go for your favorite servant. So just kind of keep those things in mind. He's like good enough to use. If he's like one of your favorite guys, by all means, go for it. Just keep in mind a bunch of weird stuff on the NA version of the game, right? But let me know down in the comments down below if you're going to be summoning for Romulus, or if you've already gone ahead and summoned for him. Let me know if you were able to get him. I hope people that are going to summon for him get him in very early multis. Like you get him first ticket, you get him first multi, because you're going to want to be saving all that Saint Quartz for all those Lost Belt 6 servants. So if you are going to summon, I hope your summons go super well. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.